Hectic parleys, hard negotiations, backroom diplomacy. Every possible avenue being explored to quell tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Experts believe that a full-scale conflict between the two sides is unlikely. But with 100,000 troops amassed on the Russian side of the border, are Ukraine, the US, NATO really prepared for a conflict should Russia decide to invade the erstwhile Soviet state? Is a war between Russia and Ukraine on the cards? Here is a ground report.
As many as 100,000 Russian troops have remained amassed at the Ukrainian border. Despite warnings from US President Joe Biden and European leaders of serious consequences should Putin move ahead with an invasion. The negotiations between Russia and the US have reached a deadlock, with the US rejecting Moscow's primary demand of not having Kiev join the NATO military alliance.
We've taken this step out of prudence. We hope those forces don't have to be activated for deployment. But if they are, we will be ready. We're also continuing to coordinate with our European allies and partners on severe economic sanctions to hold Moscow accountable for its actions.
The main question is our clear message that we consider further NATO expansion to east and weapons deployment, which can threaten the Russian Federation, unacceptable.
But experts believe that a full-scale conflict between the two sides is unlikely.
I think neither side, nor the Russians nor the United States, is seeking a fight. But the problem is that the Russians are not going to wait for another whole year for their concerns to be addressed.
I expect that the full-blown military invasion of Ukraine by Russia is unlikely. Russia has much less power than the United States and Europe combined. So Russian economy is 14 times smaller than the United States ones and 10 times smaller than the Europe's ones.
The fresh crisis in Ukraine started with the Russian threat of consequences should Ukraine decide to become a member of the NATO military alliance. The first real problem emerged in November 2013, when then Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych joined the Russian-led Eurasian Economic Union rather than signing the Ukrainian-EU agreement. This led to massive clashes called the Euromaidan movement. Eventually, the Ukrainian President Viktor was removed. In 2019, the Ukrainian parliament amended the Ukrainian constitution in order to allow the country to join NATO and the European Union.
A lot of the Western countries have shown their support. The US and the UK have sent military ammunition for Ukraine as aid in this escalating ongoing situation. Countries like the Czech Republic have said that they are ready to send their help if needed, if Ukraine asks for it. At the same time, NATO also talks about positioning their troops in Eastern Europe, positioning more troops there in the countries that are part of NATO.
The Ukrainian pro-West tilt has become a core concern for Moscow and therefore the current military build-up at the border. According to Global Firepower 2021, Russia is way stronger than Ukraine. Therefore, Kiev needs support from NATO. How is Russia looking at fighting Ukraine at the West? Russia today has carried out one of the largest military deployments in Europe after the Second World War. It has deployed over 100,000 soldiers around Ukraine, threatening the use of conventional force. Cyber war, the opening salvos of a ground offensive, will be a massive cyber attack on Ukraine's cyber infrastructure. Multi-axis attack. Russian forces could attack from Belarus, Russia, Donbass and Crimea. A multi-axis attack encircles defending forces and captures territory. The ground offensive. Russia will use artillery, armored formations of tanks and infantry combat vehicles and air power to destroy defenses, capture territory and encircle defenders. While Russia is absolutely determined to take on any overtures by the West towards Ukraine, the NATO and Europe are a divided house. Crucial in Germany's decision not to send military help lies in Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. It is the Nord Stream 2 which connects Russia directly to Germany. It offers Moscow some leverage because it bypasses Ukraine and Poland, which currently benefit from transit fee. Ukrainian president has called the pipeline a dangerous geopolitical weapon of Kremlin. The US, UK and EU have all warned Russia that it will face further crippling sanctions if it invades its neighbors. For India, it is a tightrope walk. If Moscow is sanctioned, then India's defense relations with Russia could take a hit. With both Russia and the US key strategic partners of India, taking sides is not an option. Also, any conflict in Eurasia could further deepen Russia's ties with China and divert the world's attention from Chinese aggression across the Indo-Pacific. With Maria Romanenko in Kiev and Geeta Mohan in New Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Joining us now is Maria Romanenko from Ukraine to tell us about the ground situation. Maria, many thanks for joining us here on India Today. What is the situation like amidst the tensions that we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine?
Tensions have been on the rise between Ukraine and Russia ever since Russia has started gathering its military troops on its border with Ukraine, which is towards the east of Ukraine, and also on the Belarusian-Ukrainian border towards the northern part of Ukraine. And of course, Belarus has historically been Russian ally. The situation here, I mean, it's quite a snowy day, and you can also see that it's a very quiet day, but there's also this silence of dread. And tension because people don't really know what to expect. Of course, Russia is saying that these are military drills and there's nothing to worry about. You know, these are just some regular drills, but Russia has also been playing down its part in its role in the war in the Donbass and also in its illegal annexation of Crimea. So people here don't really buy in that rhetoric, and at the same time NATO has been showing support for Ukraine, and Ukraine's Western partners have been showing support. Countries like the US and the UK have sent military ammunition as help for Ukraine in case there is a military escalation between the two countries. And NATO is discussing placing its troops in its Eastern European member countries in order to help Ukraine ward off the Russian attack if it does happen. And of course the US is saying that it is imminent. We are all watching the situation very closely. We are reacting as things go on. There is this sort of tension, as I said, but there's also this mood of defense from quite a lot of citizens. They are preparing themselves as far as they can. A lot of people are saying they are prepared to fight if it's needed.
Thank you, Maria, for joining us. We'll keep coming back to you as and when there are developments on the Ukraine and Russia front. Let's now listen into Vasyl Shevchenko, a former member of the Ukrainian parliament, who is telling us and giving us a Ukrainian perspective to the crisis that's brewing between Russia and his country.
To be honest, I cannot say exactly what have changed the last time, because as you know, we have been living in the so-called war conditions for a long time. Against Ukraine was addressed the new type of war, and now is we know this it like war in the information sphere and using against Ukraine energy resources and pressure for Ukrainian government and all of this from point of view our enemy have to put Ukraine to be weakened. And to be honest, now I can say exactly that Ukrainians are worried about nearest future. And according to the Ukrainian specialists forecasts that intervention to Ukraine, Russia's troops have took place at the end of February, and we have had information from our European partners and partners from the NATO bloc that it can take place any moment.
Welcome back. You're watching World Today. More than a dozen mutinous soldiers announced on state television that the military junta had seized control of Burkina Faso and detained the democratically elected president of the West African country. Military coup in a country that is known as the bastion of stability is the fourth of its kind in the region in just 18 months, creating an upheaval in some of the countries that have been hardest hit by Islamic extremist attacks.
Communiqué numéro 1. Peuple du Burkina Faso.
People of Burkina Faso, given the continued degradation of the security situation that is threatening the very foundation of our nation, the manifest incapacity of the government of Marc Kabore to unify the Burkinabe to effectively tackle the situation, and given the exasperation of the different sections of the nation, MPSR has decided to take its responsibilities before history. This movement, which includes all sections of the army and security, has decided to end the post of President Kabore this January 24th, 2022.
Burkina Faso soldiers stated on state television that they had seized control and dissolved the country's government and parliament. The new military regime said it has suspended Burkina Faso's constitution and dissolved the National Assembly. The country's borders have been closed, but the junta pledged a return to constitutional order in a reasonable time. After the televised announcement, crowds took to the streets, cheering and honking car horns in support of the takeover. People hoped that the coup would ease the devastation they have endured since jihadist violence spread across the country. The crowd gathered in National Square to play live music, blow horns and dance. One carried a sign in French saying no to France, a sign of growing frustration about the military role the former colonial power still plays in the region. A group was seen waving the Russian flag.
Today, Burkinabe people are asking for Russia's support to accompany them in their fierce struggle that has been imposed on us. If Russia can do our business, it is welcome.
But the international community was not happy with the overthrowing of a democratically elected government.
Secretary General is following developments in Burkina Faso with deep concern. He's particularly worried about the whereabouts and safety of President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, as well as the worsening security situation following the coup carried out on January 23rd by sections of the armed forces. The Secretary General strongly condemns any attempted takeover of government by the force of arms. He calls on the coup leaders to lay down their arms and to ensure the protection of the physical integrity of the president and of the institutions of Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso's rural north and east have been badly hit by Islamist violence. Attacks on civilians and the armed forces, including the killing of 49 men at a security post in November, prompted violent protest calling for Kabore's ouster. He replaced the Prime Minister and military chiefs, but some critics say that is not enough. While the president is safe but out of power, 4 coups in the last 18 months in Mali, Guinea, Chad and now Burkina Faso have raised alarm bells for a region that could soon be dubbed the coup belt.
The Taliban held talks in Norway with representatives from Europe on how to alleviate the situation of the humanitarian crisis that the country is facing. While the Western diplomats focused on the humanitarian crisis and the situation of women, the Taliban focused on seeking aid and legitimacy, that is, recognition for its government. However, Western diplomats have told the Taliban that while they do not want to see Afghanistan on the brink of starvation, they cannot continue with aid unless and until there is respect for human rights and the morals that they hold dearly.
An all-male 15-member Taliban delegation led by the acting foreign minister landed in Norway to hold talks on the situation in Afghanistan and the severe humanitarian crisis that the country is faced with. This is the first time that the Taliban leadership has set foot on European soil since the fall of Kabul on August 15, 2021. The closed-door meetings took place at a hotel in the snow-capped mountains above the Norwegian capital of Oslo. Britain, France, Germany, Italy and the European Union, as well as Norway, joined the meetings. The main issue, the promise of equality and inclusivity that have not been kept, making it hard for the West to work with the Taliban regime.
Perhaps the main message to Muttaqi and other leaders here is that what they promised us in Kabul, to me when I was there in September, has not become a reality in parts of the provinces.
Many Afghans are enduring Taliban brutality even as they brave the cold winter of Afghanistan with very little or no food at all. Meanwhile, there have been protests against such engagement with the Taliban and the demand for legitimacy. Around 200 protesters gathered on an icy square in front of the Norwegian Foreign Ministry in Oslo to condemn the meeting with the Taliban.
Yeah, the message is very simple. Taliban has not changed. As some international community would like to say that they have changed, that they are different now, there are some moderates. We think we have families in Afghanistan, we have friends there, and they are telling us that no, they haven't changed.
With millions of Afghans at risk of starvation this winter as poverty deepens, Norway has facilitated a series of meetings over 3 days. The talks were not without controversy, reigniting the debate over whether they legitimize the Taliban government. Norway and its NATO allies do not formally recognize the Taliban-led administration that seized power last year, but see talks as a necessity, given the depth of the crisis. Faced with the Taliban's request for funds, Western powers are putting the rights of women and girls in Afghanistan high on their agenda, along with the recurring demand of the West that Taliban administration share power with Afghanistan's minority ethnic and religious groups.
And some other stories from across the globe in World at a Glance. Take a look.
Tension has been simmering over North Korea's series of 6 weapon tests in 2022. Among the latest number of missiles launched, it has made it in a month. North Korea confirmed that it conducted a flurry of weapons tests earlier this week. Kim Jong-un regime tested long-range cruise missiles and short-range ballistic missiles. The launches have triggered international condemnation and new sanctions push from the United States. Around 82 people have been killed in an air raid on a prison in northern Yemen. A Saudi-led military coalition has intensified attack on Houthis after they claimed a drone and missile attack that struck inside the United Arab Emirates capital earlier this week. Prince Andrew has formally denied allegations that he sexually abused Virginia Giuffre and has demanded a jury trial in her civil lawsuit. She alleged that the late financier Jeffrey Epstein trafficked her and forced her to have sex with his friends, including Andrew, and that the royal was aware she was underage in the US at the time.
That's all in this edition of World Today. Thanks for watching. News and updates do continue on the other side of a short break. Stay tuned to India Today.